Like, I was actually talking to some friends where I grew up in California right now. They were also going to iftar sort of dinners and things like that. And it's kind of funny, like the 6 degrees of separation within the Pakistani brown sort of Muslim community. One friend was like, "Yeah, I met the screenwriter for Deli Boys in California," and this
Oh,
other
right,
person's
Abdullah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, this other person was like, this other friend of mine, she was like, "Oh yeah, I met Sagar in Karachi." It just like comes together in this like weird sort of 6 degrees of separation sort of feeling about the community and that sort of thing. What has surprised you the most about the reaction to Delhi Boys?
Uh,
I
ki-
mean,
yeah, I mean, kind of like you said, the fact that so many people seem to be into it from all walks of life, and I obviously only have like my, sample size of people that have reached out and told me stuff or people that I've heard from. And, definitely like I pretend like I don't read reviews and stuff, but obviously like it's hard not to when you're like, I mean, this is the biggest deal for me probably ever in terms of any role I've ever had. Yeah, I
sure,
think I'm not surprised that it turned out well because I knew the writing was strong. I knew that we had a great team and I knew that like, I mean, with all these incredible actors that I'm so lucky to have gotten to work with and writers and directors and all this stuff, like I knew that the show would be good, but I guess I didn't realize how, I guess maybe well it was marketed. Number one, shout out to the whole team and all that, but also just, yeah, it seems to really be like a unique kind of show. So I think
yeah,
that's the vibe that I've gotten because honestly, like while I am very, much in the whatever the brown entertainment world they see, whatever you want to call it, like,
yeah,
uh, I do exist in a lot of different kinds of circles,
yeah.
so pretty much, and I had my own, for example, well, the community here in Boston, after we had all of our premieres and stuff and at
Yeah.
Sundance and LA and New York, then my mom and sisters and this local really cool community organization called Subcontinental Drift, they threw like a Boston watch party. So
Oh wow.
we invited
I,
like we thought maybe 20 or 30 people would come. We had almost like 300 people. So, and it was
yeah.
people from all, again, like all corners of my life personally, or people that have just seen the show. And then even just in the last couple of, just coming from this iftar today, or like yesterday, I went to a local play where all these like friends of my mom, they're watching it. Their kids are telling them to watch it, and so it's very
So so
different
how
from.
so how are they responding to some of the language and sort of the
Oh, I haven't gotten
provocative?
any. No, it's been more of just like this is so cool for someone from our, and that's the stuff that really makes me proud is like, it's still a big, it's a big deal for, not just because we're Desi or Muslim or whatever, but like
Yeah,
anybody from like your community to like, they think like, I guess I have made it. Look, this is exactly what I wanted to do, like
yeah.
I'm still very much a struggling artist in that sense, but like, look, I did what I wanted to do. And so in that sense, I have made it. And I mean, they take a lot of pride in that. And that's really cool to see. I don't know if that makes sense.
Did you grow up like sort of watching, like sitcoms or
Oh, of
anything of that
course.
nature?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I grew up like anybody else. I mean, a Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or Seinfeld. Another reason working with Brian George is so amazing
Yeah,
for me. And yeah, I mean, countless. Like TV was a huge part of my life,
yeah.
So it's just something
Just
I always wanted to. I never imagined I'd ever get to like be on TV. So it's really cool.
just as someone who's followed media and sort of, just I guess like films and stuff like that in terms of like Pakistani or sitcoms, right? Because like in Britain there were like a series and there's still like a bunch of sitcoms which still exist, which are like Citizen Khan or Mind Your Language. Their clips come on YouTube sometimes, but you can go through a spree of watching the sarcastic humor of immigrant life in that context. I think like for me it's like, this is like another addition to that, but this is like kind of unique, in that sense. Like for you, like what is unique about the story around Deli Boys when you read the script? I know you've talked about how you got your role, but I'm sort of like focusing in on the broader legacy of like where we're at as a community, trying to see how this picks up in the context of the US. Hmm.
Yeah, I think look, for me, fortunately, so the creator Abdullah and I are literally very, very friends before we were born kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I got to read the very first draft of this show way back in the day. That being, like I've said this before, I had to audition just like anybody else to, I had 3, 4 auditions or whatever to get my part as Ali. But I remember even then reading it and being like, this is just, it's just cool. Like it's
Mhm.
finally something cool that whether or not I get to be in it, or like I just want the thing to happen. And I'm so glad that he wrote
Yeah.
it. And this is, 5, 6 years ago when I first read the drafts and stuff. And that feeling really hasn't left. And that's kind of like what I was really, obviously,
Yeah.
you make stuff as an actor or as a musician, and not former, I mean, I'm still a musician.
Yeah.
Anytime you make stuff, you're obviously like, you're anxious for people to see it and receive it and all that. Um,
Yeah.
but this one in particular, I just was like, I just knew that it was like something different, and I don't know if that specifically answers what you're saying, but just like there was just a feeling and a vibe around it, on the set while we were making it, and like when the way that everybody was interacting with each other, and I've been doing this for a while now. I haven't been on. It's only the last few years that I've started to like get more prominent roles and stuff. Um,
Yeah.
and I've been on some big sets and stuff and things like that. But I've never, and I've been fortunate to mostly have good experiences. But the vibes that we had on this show, I think the actors have spoken about this in various interviews, were just like no other. And it was almost in spite of the fact that we're all, it's like a Daisy show or whatever. So
I
yeah,
think that's what's unique. I remember like in 2007, 2008 when I was in like California, and I used to go to like fundraisers because I was doing a lot of like PSA type stuff and organizing just like doing, activism around like the dictatorship and those things. But I remember going to this like one fundraiser and meeting Iqbal Tiba, right, who was a father. And back in those days, it was just like, there's like one or two actors. Like there's like, I think Farhan Tahir or a few other actors. I'm probably missing their names, but who were based in the US and they
yeah.
were, actually like getting sitcom roles or like major feature roles. And I think like that's a really unique shift that's taking place right now in terms of artists, like comedians.
It's like Iqbal, paved the way for us to do. So
Yeah,
that's why it's another kind of like on top of that, it's an honor to like, are you kidding? I get to be in a show with that guy? Like, what the
yeah,
hell?
yeah,
So, and he being and I'm just talking about him specifically, but this extends to everybody in the cast, but like somebody like him of his, acclaim, and he's just the kindest, and he's that this show exists, and he's so like welcoming, and he's so like open, and like he's my friend now. It's
yeah,
not, that's the part that's a little bit different from like, look, not that I had a great time on Succession and everything, but like I'm not friends with those guys. Like, I mean,
yeah.
I would be, but like, I don't have their numbers and stuff, and so it was just like just a different vibe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the show, what stands out is, their effort to, like in terms of like comedy, right? And the situational comedy, like which comes about. And, like I think the two lead characters, like Sagar and just Asif,
It's okay.
Asif, like Asif as a comedian, he's totally different in character, right? Like he's a lot more, his character over here is a little bit different from how his stand-ups sort of appear. And Sagar is just, I think Sagar's acting stood out to me the most, like within the show. I don't know. What about you? Like, just like some insights about Asif, Sagar, some of the like main cast.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, it was just really excuse me, a master class, for me from that first day. And it was just, it's like, you always wonder, if you'll ever get to the point where you'll get to do something like this. And then when you're there, if it's like, it can be nerve-wracking and stuff. And like, they were just, yeah, it just made it really easy. But at the same time, like, it was, yeah, it was really amazing to watch, watch it all come together, but then also like get to be a part of it. Um, and no, everybody just brought their A game every day, man. Like
Yeah,
there was no, that's the other thing about it. Like there was none of this, like everybody was
yeah,
just excited to be there all the time. Like people were just coming in on their day off, to watch and hang out and to like mingle with people. Everybody would like, both Sagar and Asif would go out of their way to make sure like all of the background cast was like doing well and stuff, and like would,
yeah,
take time out of their day to celebrate like a PA's birthday. That kind of stuff is very, very, very rare. You know.
Yeah, and then you have like veteran actors. We obviously talked about like Iqbal Diba, but hanging
Yeah,
out
like
with probably
Purna. I mean, God, like Tim from Righteous
Brian
Gemstone.
George.
Yeah, all these people who have like either with in the case of Iqbal and Brian, we definitely grown up. Purna, like I have since I've started kind of like entering this stuff professionally, like I've looked up to her since God
Yeah,
knows what. So like, and then all of these like insane guest stars to people like Sakina Joffrey or Guillermo Diaz or like Chris Elliott, like so many people. Like I can't believe that I have anything to do with any of these people. It's pretty awesome.
yeah, yeah, and I think like when you appeared on screen, and I just remember like when you're like insulting Sagar right at the table, tall man with like a dumb face, that like that sort of banter, I guess you could say, was that genuine or was that like more spontaneous? Like,
So
was
no,
that
I mean the writing is the writing, and that's
yeah,
like while we
that
definitely
was how
had
it was planned, right?
improv, we had improv pieces here and there. We had an incredible room of writers, like a bunch of people. So I encourage people to go on IMDb, look up all of the writers, and like follow all of them, and like see what they're up to next.
Yeah,
So that brilliance was there from. It was very easy for us to take,
yeah.
what's there on the page and then kind of like riff on it a little bit. Obviously, like, throwing in, Punjabi stuff here and there. Also but a lot of that was already in the script,
Yeah.
because there was such good writing.
Hmm.
But we definitely also had the freedom to kind of like mess around and figure out what
So
was funny.
like
Now, another thing people might not know, for example, is like my character, Ali, and Mike's sort of team of Maliks, we were supposed to only be in a couple of episodes,
yeah.
but they essentially liked us so much that they wrote us into the rest of the show, so that was, another standout character from the show, Matthew Jake Prezant. He was just supposed to be the caddy and just have like one line, but they saw something in him right away, and he obviously, Matthew,
Yeah.
Jake, is an amazing part of the rest of the show too. So it was really, really
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like one thing I was, also thinking about was, just growing up in the US, right, is, the question of code switching, right?
hmm
And, like we're always like navigating these different worlds. And for you as an actor, like going on various sets, how does that play out? And also just in terms of your own role approach to acting, how does in your mind, how does it impact the way you act or like or those things. I don't know, just like getting into more
Sure.
the
Yeah. I
nitty.
mean, I think I understand what you're saying. So, I mean, I think like I'm coming now. I've been really pursuing this professionally since probably 2014, 2015.
Hmm.
So in that time, and now in the early 2000s, when my previous band, the Caminos, was kind of like coming to prominence, we were sort of at that earlier stage of all of this, kind of post 9/11 representation conversation. So I saw
Yeah,
that end of stuff. Now, in terms of being on sets and that kind of thing, like I'm in this weird place where I'm kind of like ethnically ambiguous. So
yeah,
if you look at the roles that I've gotten recently, I kind of, and I didn't realize this about myself. And maybe it's because I shaved my head, but I can kind of fit into a lot of different boxes. And I didn't, like if you different roles I've had, whether starting with Succession or like I did a Lifetime movie, or the other big role for me this year was in this action film, Aftermath. Um,
aftermath.
and now with Deli Boys, like just straight comedy, I've actually been able to occupy a lot of different spaces. And I think that in terms of your question, it depends. It's sort of a
Hmm.
case by case thing, like I've definitely been on sets where like I'm definitely the diverse person there,
Yeah,
and I'm not saying those are necessarily bad experiences, but they're different, you are, I think other folks that have spoken in their interviews about whether it's Deli Boys or something else where you don't have to like, it's always like a in the back of your mind. It
hmm,
is you don't realize how much it is until you get to do something like this where the catering has two kinds of lassi, or
yeah,
like they're like the costume designers, even though they were like white, they like knew more about my shalwar kameez and my sherwani stuff than I did, and I had to actually call my mom to double check some stuff because they were so good, so
yeah,
like so that's it. We've definitely have like come a long way, and
yeah.
yeah.
So just like, growing up in Boston, what was your experience like, or outside Boston, I believe?
Yeah, I grew up in like a suburb, like 30 minutes out. I mean, it was a pretty typical, American upbringing, I guess. In my case, it was pretty white, the town, and then I had the kind of like you talked about the Pakistani community on the
Yeah.
weekends or the Muslim community stuff. So it was, it was split between those two. And I mean, different people react to that stuff in different ways. I think some people, I definitely grew up speaking Urdu and having a strong relationship, and Urdu and some Punjabi, but then also having a strong relationship with Pakistan. So being tight with family and
You used
cousins and
to
stuff.
visit regularly?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much every couple of years. Um,
Yeah.
but it was,
Um,
yeah, that there was the very typical, like identity
expectations and
confusion.
those things.
Expectations, sure, but in terms of like the personal stuff, just like not, not really understanding, how to balance those two things.